was 1892, before most of us were born. I'm not pointing out anybody here. 1892, and his name was Homer Plessy. He lived in Louisiana. Anybody live in Louisiana before? I just know where it is on the map. He made a mistake. 1892, this is a man who was 1/8 black, and he made a point to sit in the whites-only rail car. He's on the train, and he sits down. Well, 1/8 black was enough to get you in trouble. And they pulled him in, brought him to jail, and he said, "No, this is not right." And his case went to the Supreme Court of the United States. And the United States, and they looked at it and said, we need to make a decision here. And their decision was this, 7-1. They said, the state of Louisiana made some laws that a black man cannot sit in a rail car made for white people. That's the law. So he is still guilty. And for us today, we look at that and say, what were they thinking? But for them, this was what they did. And it was 7-1. And it set up a whole system of Jim Crow laws throughout our country. It set up the separate but equal that was the law of the land in many areas of the South. 7-1. But that one dissenting voice, it was the minority on the court. His name was Justice John Marshall Harlan. He wrote this, the dissenting voice. He said, "The Constitution is colorblind, and it neither knows or tolerates classes among citizens. In respect to civil rights, all citizens are equal before the law." But he was the only voice that spoke up for this. Everybody else said, that's the law of the land. That's the way we have to go. And it wasn't until the 60s, almost 70 years later, that they changed course. It was in 1954, it was Brown versus the Board of Education, that they said, no, this is not right. A little black girl should be able to go to any school that she goes to. She should be able to go to that white school. But it was that long that this country struggled with race relations and citizens being equal before the law. And I start off this way, this is something that we know about. And in our world today, it's something that's brought forward. Yes, people are equal before the law. I start this way because oftentimes we make decisions that set a direction for ourselves, but that direction has consequences. They set off, and we made a decision, 7-1. That's our decision, and we set off on a course of discrimination and racism. And that was the consequences. And years of oppression for certain people. And years of struggling to say, I am equal before the law. And my message this morning is not about race relations. It's not about that. It's about the decisions we make have a direction that we set and leads to some consequences. Sometimes great ones. And sometimes ones that you go, we really failed on that one. The story for this morning, as well as celebration. There's a set of decisions before us that are going to set a course, a direction. But there'll be some consequences on which way we go. And we need to take those seriously. Just as they did in the Bible, you need to take these seriously. Our story for this morning is Moses and the 12 spies. It's one of that we look at and say, oh yeah, that's a good story. But and I want to walk through this and how it deals with our situation as well. And let me condense 500 years of biblical history into like 90 seconds. And then follow along with me, and I won't try to go too fast on this one. There was a man named Abram. Came from his land. It was the land of Ur, and that was his city. And he came to God's promised land because God called him. And he said, I will be your God, and your people will be numerous. And I will bless you, and I will give you a land. And I will make you a blessing of other people. And he had a son named Isaac, and he lived in this land. And his son was Jacob, and he had 12 sons and one daughter by 4 different women. And this, by the way, this is not the way to start off a family, just in case you're wondering. But they lived in the land that God promised to Abraham. But then there was a famine in the land. And they said, we're going to starve here if we don't do something. And they all went to Egypt where there was food. And they didn't know that Jacob's son Joseph was already there. He was second in command. And this was a wonderful time there where God saved his people in the land of Egypt. But then there became a Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph. And he says, what are these people prospering here for? And they made them all slaves. So God's people were slaves in Egypt. And 400 years passed between Jacob and his trip into Egypt and now. And God said, I am intervening now. I am changing the course of history here. I'm sending Moses to this Pharaoh and saying, let my people go. And I'm bringing 10 plagues on this entire nation to convince Pharaoh to let my people go. And it did. It convinced him. He said, just get out of here. Take as much gold if you want. Just take it and leave. And then he changes his mind, and God's people are going through the Red Sea on dry land. And Pharaoh and his army didn't make it. They did the dead man's float. That's what they did. And Moses leads his people to Mount Sinai where God gives them the 10 Commandments. And then they get to the edge of the promised land again. Where God has said, this is yours, this is your land. And then they send out the 12 spies, and that's where we are this morning. That was about 90 seconds. Everybody catch their breath on that one? 500 years of biblical history condensed. But this is where we go from here. Let me talk a little bit about our story today, where decisions needed to be made, directions were set, and there were consequences. Let me read with you. We're taken from Numbers chapter 13. It'll be on the screen if you want to follow. It's also in your program. After exploring the land for 40 days, the men, the spies that were sent out, returned to Moses, Aaron, and the whole community of Israel at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran. They reported to the whole community what they had seen and showed them the fruit they had taken from the land. In case you're wondering, they spied out the land and they brought back a cluster of grapes that one person couldn't carry it. And I don't think that was because they were too small of people. It was just a huge cluster of grapes. It took 2 people to carry it. That was the story on that one. And this was their report to Moses. We entered the land you sent us to explore, and it is indeed a bountiful country. A land flowing with milk and honey. Here is the kind of fruit it produces. But the people living there are powerful, and the towns are large and fortified. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. The Amalekites live in the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites live in the hill country. The Canaanites live along the coast in the Mediterranean Sea and along the Jordan Valley. But Caleb, I like Caleb. Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. Let's go at once to take the land. He said, we can certainly conquer it. But the other men who had explored the land with him disagreed. We can't go up there against them. They're stronger than we are. So they spread this bad report about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, we felt like grasshoppers. And that's what they thought too. You heard it, right? You heard there was a majority report, and then there was a minority report. The 10 men, these 10 spies that saw the land, and then there was 2 people and their view of it. There was 2 vastly different reports. There was consensus, though. There was this little section that they said, this is true. Both sides saw it. This is a great land. This is a beautiful land. It flourishes. They use the phrase, it's flowing with milk and honey, which sounds crazy to us, like a river of milk. That just sounds crazy. But they meant it as, this is a beautiful land. It's thriving. We can thrive here. And they both agreed. And then, this majority of guys, the majority report said, we're scaredy pantses. We're really scared. Those other people, they're much too big. They're giants. They live in fortified cities. There's no way we can defeat them. There's no way that we can win. And then there was 2 guys. Joshua and Caleb. Joshua and Caleb over here say, wait a minute. We can do this. We can take them. They're just people. They're not God. We can conquer them. Let's go right now. And you got to love the passion there. There was 2 different ideas of reality. There was a battle for reality here, and they both saw the same thing, but they had a different view of that reality. See, the majority of these guys, they lost the battle for reality to fear. They were so afraid that their whole reality, they'd lost the battle already. They haven't even fought anybody yet, and they already lost. There was a legendary football coach, Newt Rockne, and his team, it was Notre Dame. So sorry if you have like a bad feeling whenever you hear the word Notre Dame. I don't know. Some people do. Some people, like Michigan fans, always think Notre Dame, but I don't know this stuff. But he was the head football coach for Notre Dame, and one day he was going up against USC, which was going to be the toughest game of the year for them. And what he did is he went in the student body and he recruited 100 of the biggest, brawniest guys in the student body. And he said, all right, I need you for this game. Oh, you're not going to play. No, don't worry about that. We're just going to suit you up and you're going to run onto the field. That's your job. Okay, great. I can do that. So USC, they come out on the field first. Yeah, we'll stretch. All right, we're ready. However, they do that nowadays. And all of a sudden, this thundering came from the tunnel. It sounded like elephants running onto the field. And these huge bodies are running out there. And everyone from USC stopped and looked at this. These guys are huge. And they stopped stretching and preparing for the game. And the coach noticed it and he said, wait a minute, guys. Only 11 guys can play at once. But the damage was done. They had already lost the game. And they did. They lost the game because they already were afraid. These guys, they didn't even play. They just sat on the bench. But they already lost. That's the story here. The reality, the battle for reality of the majority of the people that went and spied out the land, they had already lost. They lost the battle to fear. They were intimidated by evil. And the worst part of it is that there was some consequences for not having faith in God. There was some consequences. This is what they said, we're going to make this decision, we're not going. We're scared. I love my family too much, they'll die, and I'll die. So they decided not to go. That was the direction they went. And the consequences were this. God said, everyone that is 21 years or older, you will never see this land again. You're going to die in the desert. Your children that you are fearful for, that are under the age of 21, they'll see it. They'll inherit the land. But you who had no faith in me or where I was going to do for you, you'll never see it. Everyone except Joshua and Caleb. They're the ones that did the minority report here. Only them who were over 21 got to see the promised land. Do we hear that? Do we hear that for us? Because we're those people sometimes, we're the ones that are scared. God, what do you want to do for us? I don't know. I'm really scared. There's evil people out there. They're giants. They're mean. We feel like grasshoppers to them. And they think we're grasshoppers. We're too weak. For us here, we need to overcome that. We need to have that reality of what true reality is. And sometimes that happens by we remember the past. We need to remember our past. And this is how it goes sometimes. The people of Israel, the people that were on the verge of going into God's promised land, they knew this. This is what they knew. They knew that God led Abraham from a far country and said, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make you a blessing for other people. I'm going to give you this beautiful land. I'm going to multiply you, and your descendants will be like the stars in the sky. They knew this. They knew that he had led them there, that they'd given a son, Isaac, and Isaac had a son, was Jacob, and he had 12 sons and even a daughter, and God saved them from starvation, brought them to Egypt, and even there he helped them prosper. They became a huge nation within Egypt. And God even saved them there. He provided for them. He said, I'm bringing you back. God was faithful for them even there. Brought them back. Saved them. Helped them go through the Red Sea while Pharaoh and his army didn't. God was faithful to them. This is what they all knew. They knew this. Yet when 10 people come back and say, this is bad news, we're afraid, they all of a sudden forgot the past. They forgot that God loved them and said, you are my people. I am going to provide for you. They forgot. And did they think that God would suddenly just abandon them now? He had led them through all these things. Was he going to abandon them now? Let's go right here now. Just right now. Do we think that God will abandon us after all that he's brought us through? Do we think that he'll do that? Oh no, there's some scary things in our world. We should be scared. Do we forget the past and how God has brought us through so many things? Let me just be more specific even. I'll just tell you about celebration. Celebration started with the closing of another church, and then there was at least 12 people that got together in the room that said, man, we should have a church that celebrates worship. That is a place that's welcoming, that people, it's almost impossible for them not to feel welcomed. That this should be a place that is like a celebration when they come there. Oh, that's a great idea. Let's name it Celebration. Let's start a church. And not long after that, they called Pastor Don. And Don helped formulate this organization of what was a people. People, if you're new here, this is the Church of Misfit Toys. We're all broken in some ways. And He helped bring them together and say, this is going to be where God's people will worship on a Sunday morning, this local church. And they bounced around 7 different places at least, like church basements and libraries and schools. And they say, well, where are we going to land here? And God stayed with us. This is home now. This is home. Do we think that God will suddenly abandon us now? That's our question. Because that's our decision that we need to make. Is He going to abandon us? We need to set a direction that we leave in faith. Because there's going to be consequences one way or another. I want to talk about that because Gary brought that up during the announcements, the idea of we need some feedback from people. A couple weeks ago we said, we're going to go through this year. It's an important year that we're going to say, where are we going as a church? For this year, and the first thing that we needed people to do is to pray specifically about celebration. God, would you lead the leaders? And will you lead us as the people that we might do your will? We need to pray about this specifically in our direction. And then in your bulletin, we put a link to go and do an assessment. It's like 30 questions or so. They said it takes like 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes. I don't know why it took like 25. It probably took 30 for me, but it's like 20 minutes or so. There's a QR code for some people who like to do it on their phone. And that just like went over the head of a lot of people, like QR code. I'm not sure what that is, but that sounds good, Matt. Good work. But we want your input in this because we have some decisions that we need to make on where, God, are you leading us? And when we make those decisions, we need to have this idea of reality. Saying, yes, there's some crazy things in our culture and there's some crazy things in our neighborhoods, but we leave with faith that our God has not abandoned us before. And He's not going to abandon us now. And for some of this, it's going to be some work. And it's going to be some effort. And we need to figure out, how can we do this? The information of this is going to go towards us going forward. Because God wasn't done with His people on the edge of the promised land. He wasn't done with them. And He's not done with celebration right now. Now let me give you a little, I'll go forward with the story here. God sent the rest of His people out in the desert. Everyone under the age of 21 except Joshua and Caleb, they weren't making it out of the desert. But this is the good part. After 40 years, He brought them back around. 40 years, He said, I'm not done with you. Come on back. We're going to try this again. And they got to the same place. They're on the eastern side of the Jordan River saying, all right, we're going to go across. And this time, how many spies did they send? They sent 2. They only sent 2 because they had it in their head. My God, we have not been deserted in the desert. He's not going to desert us now. He didn't abandon us to our own ways there. He's not going to abandon us out. We only need to send 2 out just to get some information. Because we're going with our God this time. We're going with Him. That's our reality. Our faith is in Him. And they go across, and in 5 years' time, fortified city after fortified city fall to them. First one's Jericho. And then there's other ones. They just keep falling because God is with His people. And these giants that live in the land are nothing compared to our God. And they keep falling. And then Caleb, who's still one of my favorite people ever in the Bible. And when I get to heaven, I just want to sit down. I don't know if you have coffee with people, but I just want to we'll take up a couple hours just sitting talking. This is what Caleb says. In Joshua chapter 14, he says this. Today I'm 85 years old. I have this idea of like old Mike Straley. I'm 85 years old. He's just walking around. I'm 85. And I'm as strong now as I was when Moses sent me on that journey. And I can still travel and fight as well as I could then. Do you have the picture of an 85-year-old saying that? Because in their head, that's reality. Who knows if he was still strong like that? I don't know. But he thought this. That was reality for him. So this is what he said. So, give me the hill country that the Lord promised me. You will remember that as scouts we found the descendants of Anak living there in great walled towns. Wait a minute. He says, give me the area where the giants are. I want to go where the giants are. I'm going to bring people and we're going to fight the giants. Don't give me the coastal land or the prairie area. I'm going to the hill country. I'm 85 years old. We're going to fight the giants. Are we that strong? Are we that determined? Because this is what he said. This is the reason why he said that. But if the Lord is with me, I will drive them out of the land just as the Lord said. If the Lord is with us, we will drive out all the obstacles that face us, just as our God said. Boy, can we be Caleb, filled with faith, ready to go out and live a faith-fueled adventure with our God. Are you ready to see amazing things that God will do as we go out in faith? Set that direction. Saying, this is our reality, we're going this direction. God, whatever consequences you lead us to, whatever direction we're going here, whatever comes our way, that's where we're going. But we're going with you because you have been good to us. You know, over the next year, we're going to talk about that. It's not just today, and then we're just not going to talk about it. We're going to keep talking about this. And where are we going? And my hope is that you are so ready to be amazed on what God wants to do through His people. Let me close it up this way. There was a mom who was planning a surprise birthday party for her young son. A surprise birthday party. You know, it was going to be a great event. She invited all his little friends, brought them in. But unbeknownst to him, he went up to his room. He was sitting upstairs. He was relaxing. All of his friends are down in the living room. They're ready for him to come downstairs. So his mom calls, hey, little Johnny, come on downstairs. There's no answer. There's no little pitter-patter of feet coming down the stairs. Come on, Johnny, come on down. And there's nobody who comes. She even goes upstairs and there's nobody in his room. Well, what do? Well, everybody else, they get to enjoy the party. There's cake there. There's games to play, so they have a great time. Turns out that he climbed out his window on the roof and he found his way outside. He went to the park and hid at the park while everybody else was having a great old time. And he comes back home for supper because that's the way little boys work. When you're hungry, you come back home again. And he comes home and his mom says, wow, where were you? We had this great party planned. Well, I heard you calling me. And I hid until supper time because I thought you had some chores for me to do. You know, God's got some great plans for us. They're not chores. And we're going to do some wonderful things here as we have done wonderful things in the past. He's got some great things for us. Oh, we need to grab a hold of that and saying, yes, if my God is with us, we're going to go and do some great things. My hope is that in celebration, that we say, God, we are leaving with you. And wherever you lead us over this next year, And I hope that you will commit to that. It's our faith in our God who has been faithful in the past and will continue to do so. My hope is that we become like Caleb. Says, don't give me the coastal plains, give me the hill areas with those giants who live in the fortified cities. And he would say something like, we are more than conquerors through Christ who loves us. Let me pray that that is the reality that we leave with. So pray with me. Lord Jesus, we pray for your guidance today, and we always pray this because you do not fail us ever. And without your guidance, we will fall apart. Somehow we forget that you hold us in your hands, and there's nothing that will ever take us from your hands. God, there's giants in the land, and they roar, and our fears, they cause us to shake. Help us to stay focused on this reality that though the wrong seems oft so strong, you are still the ruler yet. Lead us in this time of discernment. Give us your wisdom and grace to follow you no matter what. We praise your name, God. Amen.